Well, with us now is Jonathan Russell. He's the Political Liaison Officer at the Quilliam Foundation, a counter-terrorism think tank. And interesting to get your views on this, Jonathan. If there's one line from that speech where Theresa May says, "Those who seek to spread hate, we will disrupt you." What do you hear from that? What is that? What does that actually mean?
I think it's Theresa May trying to find consensus across government, but also across the political spectrum on what extremism really is. And she's defining it in a negative way against values that we hold dear in this country. And
is one of those values freedom of speech? I mean,
one of them is freedom of speech, but others are tolerance, are pluralism, are gender equality, and human rights and things like that. Which is why, to a certain extent, we've seen proposed action against Sharia courts that seek to contravene the notion that we have one law for all. But equally, we see things that promote an Islamic State and promote other notions of gender inequality, clamped down on in places like university campuses.
So what does Quilliam make of this then? I mean, did you listen to it live as it went out?
I did, and my takeaway is that it's a positive direction. It's the cut and thrust of it. There's very little we can disagree with. However, it's almost where we were 5 years ago, in that we've been waiting for a written down, tangible strategy that gives guidance to all government departments and provides a cohesive, coherent, concise message that can be implemented in the Department for Education, all the way through to the Department for Communities. This was asked for by the Communities Department back in 2011, and it hasn't come. Theresa May and her department has therefore had to rush something out, and they haven't had time to push things through before Parliament rises later next week.
But doesn't that tell you then that there is stuff to disagree with in that speech, which is presumably why it's taken 5 years to do anything with this?
I think, and this is the crux of my criticism with it. If we can find a values-based approach to tackling extremism, it should be something that all coalition members should be able to agree on. It should also be something that all departments can agree on. And crucially, it's something that shouldn't be made into a political football ahead of an upcoming general election.
All right, but let's just dissect that then. A values-based sort of clampdown is where it gets tricky, right? Because there will be people saying, as soon as you start telling people they're going to disrupt, hate speech or whatever, some people will hear that as common sense, and other people will hear that as a shutting down of debate. And we spoke to somebody who works with young people liaison. She said, you're just banning people from saying that out loud, so they then go onto the forums and the places where the Home Secretary won't look for them or can't look for them. And you've got another problem in the making. That's
right. So we should challenge this on the top level. We should not be looking to push it underground. But I think we do need some sort of strategy that really identifies that there's an extremist ideology behind lots of this, and that sometimes that manifests itself in violence, but sometimes it doesn't. But it nonetheless poses a challenge to our institutions and to our values and to our society. Of course, we need different means to tackle these different things. We might need to take a military approach when it's manifesting itself in Iraq. We might need to take a legislative approach when there is a direct national security threat.
Okay, but go back to this idea then of British values, which sounds, almost like a platitude. Everyone's got to share these British values. But I was speaking to a woman who represents a lot of young Muslim kids who say, I don't understand what a British value is. When you look at the foreign policy that Britain has espoused over the last 10 years, and clearly they're talking about the Iraq War and Afghanistan and all the rest of it, they don't understand why that is a British value that they should espouse if it is. How do you start by explaining to people what they should and shouldn't think on that?
Well, I don't think the Iraq War is a British value, and I don't think Theresa May is trying to suggest that either. But I think what she's trying to say, and what I would endorse too, is that extremism is an opposition to general values, which she has not necessarily spelled out, but has mentioned, are tolerance and pluralism, human rights, gender equality, and other things like that. Now, that's nothing to do with foreign policy. Foreign policy may be a grievance, which is manipulated by extremists to prompt people to do things that pose a national threat. However, the narrative that underpins this exploitation of the grievances is itself propped up by opposition to values. And it's these values which, yes, I wouldn't call them British values, they are universal values. They're as found in the Magna Carta as they are in the Quran, but they are entirely sensible, modern, 21st century ideas that I don't think we can oppose.
And how easily do those values sit with Sharia law and the courts and the councils as they work at the moment? Because that was the other side of her sort of practical argument, was shutting down the stuff that doesn't work there.
Well, I think there's a macro issue and a micro issue here. On the macro level, there's a big problem with a parallel legal system that provides legal advice for people who may not know their rights and responsibilities in Britain in 2015. On a micro level, once you look into the narrow interpretation of Sharia law that's espoused in some of these courts, these are issues that are completely against gender equality, for example, but also are not fair to people on grounds of their religion or their sexuality or other things like that are universally defined and accepted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I think we've got to look at them. Yes, I think we should not have parallel legal systems in this country, and therefore we've got to look at ways of closing them.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thanks for coming in.